say, look, I'm not a crook. They refuse to remove me from office.
Yeah,
and that would really make us as a country look like shit. And it's an open question to whether or not that would actually materially benefit his reelection chances. I really don't think that it would. I really think impeachment would not hurt the Democrats. I think it would necessarily hurt the president if the articles of impeachment were persuasive enough.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like, the Democrats, they could make a case for impeachment, but it has to be a strong case and a well-presented case, which, I mean, I kind of doubt that they could. I mean, if they really tried, maybe they could, but if they, I'm not going to put it on the odds at 100%. Like, don't have complete confidence in them, in all honesty, to go out there and make the perfect case for impeachment and really do it in a good, solid way that kind of packs a punch. But I definitely think that, at least in their base, there is a real desire to hold Trump accountable, to see him, like you see on Twitter, all the people saying, I can't wait till you're let out of office, out of the White House in handcuffs. I mean, not to that extent, obviously, but to a large portion of people, at least in the Democratic base, there's a strong desire to just kind of see Trump kind of punished and kind of return to normalcy. And that kind of impeachment, or at least an effort of impeachment, as you can say, really would motivate them. But do you think that is enough of the population to be motivated to really make a difference in a possible election?
I mean, that segment of the electorate that you're describing is already going to vote for Democrats. So it's not really. I mean, it's that's already the Democratic base at this point. So it's not really that much to consider there. I do want to add, though, that a big reason to support impeachment, and a big reason to think Nancy Pelosi is wrong here, is to follow her reasoning. And if Trump were to not be impeached and then win re-election, there is absolutely no way the Democrats, even if they won back the Senate, could and maintain their control of the House, could ever impeach him. Because then he can say, well, look, I can't be a criminal because I was reelected, because a plurality of people, or maybe not even a plurality, but whatever, you could say the country said, no, that we love that shit you're doing. That's fine. That's not corrupt or anything like that. And it basically says, and this is a message for every future president, as things get worse, as they probably will, that presidents can't be impeached anymore. That's done.
Yeah,
at least not by Democrats.
Yeah, and you can really imagine the next time that a Democrat slips up a little, the Republicans really kind of pouncing on him or her, and saying and just kind of piling on, and that kind of movement being successful. So it's definitely a tricky thing to navigate, for sure.
They point to the Republicans impeaching Clinton, and the Republicans also knew.
Mm-hmm.
I want to walk that back. I don't actually know if the Republicans thought that Clinton could be removed from office, because it's my understanding that it was kind of touch and go there at first, and that the people in the Clinton White House really thought there was a chance that the conservative Democratic senators would vote to remove him from office.
So yeah, that kind of mindset going into it could have been a interesting factor for them in their decision to move forward. But we did talk a little bit about the Democratic base, and that is something that the Democratic base was really excited over. At least a large portion of liberals were very excited about this past Friday. Was obviously the climate strike that took place around the world, and really an incredible amount. And I have to ask, did the Chapo Trap House crew get out there on the streets and do some climate striking?
I believe Matt did. To be honest with you, I wasn't actually familiar with the climate strike until it happened.
Oh. You're not.
I had known. I had people had mentioned it to me offhandedly, but I never made that connection that this is going to be a big thing. As I understand it, it was much larger in other countries, especially in the UK and Australia.
Yeah, some of the pictures in Australia and those parks and every street was just absolutely filled. It was quite incredible to see.
But my skepticism, and I don't know I don't know who organized the climate strike exactly, or what their, if there's any program behind that specific program. But I would say that, as a I think there's value in demonstrations, but this isn't the same as a strike. We shouldn't be confused on our terminology.
That's
a strike can force change if the people who are instrumental to the operation of society went on strike. If every truck driver went on strike, then yes, they can get their demands. If every refinery worker went on strike, they could affect an actual change in our energy policy. But a one-day demonstration, even if people walk off the job, that's not a strike. I know there are people who say what we need is a general strike in the country, and I'm very sympathetic to that view. But I'm kind of sitting and waiting to see what material conditions would cause that to emerge, because it's not really the kind of thing that just happens because you get up and say, come on, everyone, let's do this. There has to be an immediate pressure on people that these conditions that where we're going is so intolerable that would cause them to potentially sacrifice their livelihoods to go on strike.
Yeah, a general strike to such a degree, that's a very, very kind of big decision to make. I think it's definitely, if you took an actual strike like the one going on in GM right now, and the gun rally or the women's march, I think you get something that's a lot more closer to the gun rally or the women's march that took place already, the March for Our Lives. It was called. I definitely think it kind of raised awareness because I know a lot of people who I didn't really realize were that politically active, or they went to the climate strike. They were aware of the issue. Everyone was talking about it to a certain degree, and people, especially people who don't normally talk about politics before. But I kind of wonder, and I do want to get your opinion on this. What impact is it going to actually have in in changing the way things are? I don't really think it provided a clear plan of what to do, how to solve the problem, other than the fact that, hey, there is a problem going on with the climate.
I mean, demonstrations don't really do that. The biggest demonstrations in, as I understand the history of the world, were demonstrations on the eve against the Iraq War, on the eve of the Iraq War against George Bush. And they did not stop the Iraq War, but I think they did send a message that there is a critical mass of people who are not gung-ho about, blowing up a Middle Eastern country. Maybe that's the value of a demonstration then, is to dispel the fear that you are alone in your anxiety or misery or your suffering about the way things are going. In terms of, actual forward movement on climate, we obviously need another president. And as well, I think we need a social and political infrastructure that we don't yet have. In other words, we need a transformation of society and of our view of the government and our view of the economy and public enterprise in order to make meaningful changes to our emissions. And the big reason why is because you could probably, through some series of tinkerings and modest reforms, probably reduce America's net emissions to zero by, 2050 or something like that. And that wouldn't be enough. It's not that we have to get to zero, it's that the entire world has to get to zero. And as well, it's that it's easy for us to say that we have a decarbonized economy because our emissions are zero when we've outsourced offshored our entire manufacturing sector to countries that increase their emissions by the same amount that we reduce them. I think that is the fear.
Yeah,
and that's the fear, and that's like that I'm giving that example to indicate, and this is what many people are talking about, what presidential candidates are talking about, what the Green New Deal is all about, which is that forestalling climate change, mitigating the effects of climate change, ideally preventing the fucking ice caps from melting, is not just a matter of making reforms to energy policy. It is a totalizing thing. It means remaking our economy. And unless we pursue a climate policy along socialist lines, along the notion of mass ownership of the economy, we're going to get climate austerity, something that exacerbates our pre-existing inequalities while making things worse for people on the bottom.
Yeah, I definitely think there could be. There's definitely who really knows what could happen if we don't really make these kind of changes and do that kind of, as you say, that structure. And that really was kind of what I was going to ask you, like, what makes really the Green New Deal? Because every candidate running in 2020, they have some sort of a climate plan. Like, it could be really moderate, like Amy Klobuchar, or it could be Pete Buttigieg, it could be whatever. Like, but there is, I think, it's so interesting the way you, like, the kind of extra element that's missing of not only just doing like a carbon tax or whatever, but there is kind of a second element to the Green New Deal that no other climate change plan has out there about restructuring the economy along a more equitable means for all in the coming struggle that we have to fight against the climate change. And that's what I think really distinguishes the plan from anything else. But
right, on that point, it's funny that the socialist left has been hamstrung by its communication success, because Medicare for all, if you remember correctly, like, this is an idea that emanated from the socialist left, and it was a way of selling people on what was then, and by then I mean 5 years ago, a radical concept, which is that we would eliminate private insurance and have universal single-payer health insurance. And the idea was, okay, people have Medicare. They like Medicare. Medicare equals good in people's minds. What we're talking about is a comparable system. It's not the same, but it's comparable in the sense that it is a universal entitlement. So let's just call it Medicare for all. The problem is, it seems that every presidential candidate has co-opted that phrase, except for the ones who are particularly intransigent or hostile to it, like John Delaney or Joe Biden. I think the same goes for Green New Deal, really. The idea that, okay, well, people have a general idea of what the New Deal is, and they think it's good. And people like the term green, so let's mash these terms together, and we'll call it the Green New Deal to give people an indication of how transformative and ambitious this program is, much like the New Deal was fundamentally transformed the trajectory of American capitalism.
And I mean, I really kind of had to laugh out, almost really like laugh out loud when Kamala Harris started talking about her Medicare for All plan. Is like as if Medicare for All was like a genre of different plans, like you can have one option or and not the other, kind of a thing. And there is, as you say, a lot of different candidates trying to co-opt right now what is the popular Democratic Party, and really, I think, nationwide message of Medicare for All and Green New Deal and stuff like that. Like, how do you, like, what's your advice to people out there who may not, like, know every little trick and every little terminology? Like, what should they watch out for candidates in order to distinguish who actually believes in a real Medicare for All or Green New Deal plan, or who is just saying it to kind of, like, score political points?
In terms of Medicare for all, the fundamental question is, should there be